The wipers fight a losing battle against the rain. Each swipe reveals a slick black ribbon of asphalt for a fleeting second before the world dissolves again into a curtain of gray. It is 2 a.m. on the Colina Sagrada, the sacred hill of Salvador, Brazil. For Antonio, a taxi driver with 30 years of nights under his belt, this is just another Tuesday. The rain keeps most people home, but it also means those who are out are desperate for a ride. He is tired. He is thinking of his bed, of the coffee his wife will have waiting for him. He is thinking of anything but the road ahead. That's why, at first, he doesn't believe what he sees. Standing on the side of the road, just past the great gates of the Bonfim cemetery, is a woman. She is alone, without an umbrella, her form a pale silhouette against the oppressive darkness. He slows the car, his headlights cutting through the downpour, illuminating her. She is young, impossibly beautiful, with long blonde hair plastered to her face by the rain. She wears a white dress, a formal, old-fashioned gown that seems to belong to another century. It is completely soaked, yet it clings to her with a strange, ethereal grace. There is no one else around, no broken-down car, no nearby house. Every instinct honed by decades of navigating the city's dangers screams at him to keep driving. But she looks so fragile, so lost. He pulls over, the car's engine a low rumble against the drumming of the rain. She opens the back door and slides in without a word. "Where to, moça?" he asks, looking at her in the rearview mirror. A chill, sudden and invasive, fills the car, making him shiver. The air grows heavy with the thick, sweet scent of funeral roses. "Just down the hill," she says. Her voice is a whisper, soft and melodic, but as cold as the grave. He drives, his eyes darting between the slick road and the rearview mirror. She is perfectly still, her pale face a mask of profound sadness, her eyes fixed on something far beyond the rain-streaked window. The silence in the car is heavier than any he has ever known. They reach the bottom of the hill, an old, quiet residential street. "Here is fine," she whispers. Antonio pulls over. He clears his throat, preparing to state the fare. "That will be..." He turns around. The back seat is empty. His heart stops. He fumbles for the interior light, his hand shaking. The light flickers on. The seat is empty, but it is not dry. A dark, wet patch stains the fabric where she had been sitting, the shape of a person, even though the rest of the car is bone dry. The door had not opened. He would have heard it. The lock is still down. She had not gotten out. She had simply ceased to be there. He scrambles out of the car into the rain, his mind refusing to accept what he has seen. He looks around wildly, and there she is, standing across the street, on the sidewalk, under a flickering gas lamp. She is looking at him, and slowly she raises a pale, slender arm and points, not at a house, not at a building. She is pointing back up the hill, towards the place they just left, towards the high stone walls of the Bonfim cemetery. This is not a testimony given to the police. It is one of dozens, hundreds of identical accounts collected over nearly a century from men who have given a ride to the same woman, a woman who was murdered in 1895. To find our ghost, we must first find her killer. This is not a haunting case. This is a homicide case, and it's been cold for over 100 years. Our case file opens in the Salvador of the late 19th century, a city of dazzling wealth and abyssal poverty, the cultural and spiritual capital of Brazil. And at the center of our case is a young woman who was herself a legend long before she became one. Her name was Ana Luisa de Menezes. To the high society of Salvador, she was a vision, a creature of porcelain and gold, a whispered name at elegant balls she was never allowed to attend. The only daughter of a powerful coffee baron, she was famous for two things: her ethereal beauty and her profound fragility. Ana Luisa was blonde, with skin so pale it seemed translucent, and eyes the color of a stormy sea. In a city defined by the sun and a vibrant mix of African and Portuguese heritage, she was an anomaly, a genetic rarity that made her both an object of desire and a subject of intense gossip. But her delicate, almost ghostly appearance was also the symptom of her gilded prison. She was a consumptive. Tuberculosis, the white plague that swept through the 19th century, was a disease that carried a strange, dark romanticism. It hollowed out its victims, making their eyes seem larger, their skin more luminous. A tragic, feverish beauty that was a prelude to the grave. Because of this, Ana Luisa's father, a man of immense power and even greater fear, kept her a virtual prisoner in the family's vast, opulent mansion in the Vitoria corridor. Her world was a curated silence, a collection of rooms filled with European furniture, heavy velvet curtains that blocked out the sun, and the constant cloying smell of medicinal herbs. Her days were a metronome of private tutoring, poetry readings, and lonely hours spent at a grand piano, her fingers dancing across the keys, playing music that was as full of passion and longing as her own heart. She was given everything a young woman of her class could desire, except the one thing she craved: freedom. From her balcony, she could see the life of Salvador unfolding below. She watched the great ships with their tall masts entering the Bay of All Saints, carrying goods and people from all over the world. She could hear the faint rhythmic pulse of the candomblé drums from the terreiros in the poorer neighborhoods, a sound that was both thrilling and forbidden. She could smell the acarajé frying in the street, the scent of dendeile and spices, a smell of life, of energy, of everything she was denied. She was a treasure to be guarded, a glass doll waiting to shatter. But Ana Luisa was not made of glass. Inside her was a fierce, defiant spirit, a hunger for life that grew more intense as she felt the disease slowly stealing it from her. She did not want to fade away in a perfumed room, a tragic heroine in a romantic poem. She wanted to feel the cobblestones under her feet, to hear the music up close, to dance. She wanted, for one single night, to be a participant in the world, not just a spectator. And she knew her time was running out. Salvador, in 1895, was a city of violent contradictions, a place of dizzying heights and terrifying depths. By day, it was the Black Rome, the seat of Catholic power in the New World. It was a city of over 300 churches, their interiors so laden with gold leaf that they seemed to bleed sunlight, a testament to the immense wealth generated by sugar and coffee. In the Ciudad Alta, the upper city, Life was a carefully choreographed performance of European etiquette. The elites, the plantation owners, and the wealthy merchants moved between their mansions, the opera house, and the exclusive social clubs, their world insulated by money and power. But to get from the port to this upper world, one had to pass through the Pelourinho, the old city center. And when night fell, this area and the Ciudad Baja, the lower city near the port, transformed. The rigid Catholic order gave way to something older, more primal. The sounds of the berimbau from capoeira circles, the rhythmic chanting from hidden candomblé ceremonies, the shouts of sailors from a dozen different nations spilling out of dark, smoky taverns. It was a world of immense energy, but also of immense danger. It was a place where fortunes were lost on a card game, where disputes were settled with the flash of a knife, and where a person could disappear into the shadows without anyone asking questions. The line between these two worlds was not just social, it was physical. A massive cliff face separated the upper and lower cities, connected only by steep, winding streets and the newly constructed Elevador La Cerda, a towering symbol of the city's ambition to bridge its own deep divides. For a woman of Ana Luisa's class, to be seen in the lower city at night, unescorted, was social suicide. It was an unforgivable stain on her family's honor, and, as it would turn out, a mortal danger. Overlooking this entire spectacle of life and death, of piety and sin, was the city's final destination, the Bonfim Cemetery. Perched atop the sacred hill, it was a place of pilgrimage, of miracles, and of a deep, abiding respect for the dead. A place where, it was whispered, the line between the living and the dead was perilously thin. The night of the crime was a night of rebellion, a lavish masked ball, a pre-carnival celebration, was being held in a palacete in the lower city. It was the event of the season, but for Ana Luisa, it was strictly forbidden. Her father would never allow his fragile daughter to venture into that den of vice. But the desire for one night of life was stronger than a lifetime of obedience. With the help of a sympathetic maid who had known her since childhood, a plan was hatched. A stunning, cream-colored silk gown was smuggled into the house. A simple, elegant mask was procured. For the first time, Ana Luisa would not be a patient in a sick dress. She would be an anonymous woman at a party. She slipped out of her gilded prison, a ghost leaving her own tomb, and descended into the vibrant, dangerous heart of the Salvadoran night. We have no record of what happened at that ball. Did she meet a secret lover, a man her father would never approve of? Did she simply revel in her anonymity, dancing with strangers, her laughter finally free from the confines of her sick room? We can only imagine the intoxicating thrill of it all, the music, the lights, the press of the crowd, the feeling of being truly alive. What we know is what happened after. She never came home. She left the party in the early hours of the morning, alone. Perhaps she refused the offer of a carriage, wanting to extend her precious few hours of freedom, to walk under the stars and breathe the night air. She began the long, steep climb back to the upper city. The streets were emptying, the music fading behind her. The vibrant energy of the party gave way to the silence of the sleeping city. A young, wealthy, blonde woman walking alone through the dark, liminal space between Salvador's two worlds. She was a single flame in the darkness, and the darkness noticed. The crime was not a single moment. It was a process. It was the sound of her elegant shoes on the cobblestone, and then the sound of other heavier footsteps, their pace quickening to match hers. It was the sudden cold dread of realizing she was being followed. And then it was silence. 3 days later, a gravedigger making his morning rounds on the outskirts of the Bonfim cemetery noticed a flash of cream-colored silk in a ditch. It was Ana Luisa. Her ball gown was torn and stained with mud, her body a testament to a final, brutal struggle. The official investigation was a masterpiece of deliberate incompetence. The Menezes family, a pillar of Salvadoran society, was devastated not just by grief, but by the public shame of it all. Their daughter, their porcelain doll, had been found in a ditch like a common stray. They used their immense influence to contain the scandal. The police report was brief. The cause of death, officially recorded as a tragic return of her lung affliction. The case was closed before it was ever truly opened. Ana Luisa de Menezes was buried in a quiet, private ceremony in the Bonfim cemetery, and the high society of Salvador did what it does best. It forgot. But the city did not forget. The servants whispered, the dock workers whispered. The story of a beautiful, rich girl, murdered and abandoned, was too powerful to be buried. The official case file is closed, sealed by money and shame. But for us, the investigation is just beginning. Who killed Ana Luisa, and why, decades later, does she seem to have decided to come back to solve the case herself? A murder investigation with no body, no crime scene, and a century of silence. How do you hunt a ghost? You don't. You hunt the story that created her. Our investigation moves forward in time, leaving the gas lamps of the 19th century behind and entering the age of the automobile. The first credible, widespread reports of the Bonfim Blonde begin to surface in the 1930s and 40s. The timing is no coincidence. This was the era when taxis became a fixture of the urban landscape, when taxi drivers became the modern-day ferrymen, the confidants and chroniclers of the city's secret life. Our first piece of evidence is the chilling consistency of their testimony. We have analyzed dozens of accounts, from yellowed newspaper clippings to academic folklore archives. The narrative is a recurring, unshakable loop. It always happens late, on a dark or misty night. The driver is always alone, finishing his shift. The woman always appears, on the road leading up to the Bonfim cemetery. She is always described with the same haunting words: beautiful, blonde, pale, dressed in an old-fashioned white gown. She is quiet, her sadness a palpable presence in the car. She never tries to haggle the fare, and she always vanishes at the gates of the cemetery. The details are too specific, too uniform, to be a series of unrelated hoaxes or drunken tall tales. We are not dealing with a simple story. We are dealing with a recurring event, a phantom with a clear, established pattern. In our investigation, the suspect is the legend itself. Why did this story emerge, and why did it take this specific form? We must investigate the potential authors of this myth. Our first suspect is the city's own guilty conscience. Could the story have been born from the collective,
unprocessed trauma of Ana Luisa's murder. A society that allowed a brutal crime against a young woman to be swept under the rug is a society with a deep psychic wound. The ghost of Ana Luisa can be seen as a manifestation of that guilt, a symbol of an unresolved injustice.
Her repeated appearance is a form of cultural memory, a way for the city's conscience to keep the case file open, refusing to let the victim be forgotten a second time. In this theory, the ghost is not a person. It is a living monument to a crime without a resolution, a question that haunts the city's very streets. Our second suspect is fear, but not a supernatural one. The roads around the Bonfim cemetery at night were notoriously lonely and, at times, dangerous. For a taxi driver, a lone figure on the side of the road is a constant gamble. Is it a legitimate fare in desperate need, or is it a trap, a setup for a robbery or worse? The story of the Bonfim Blonde serves as a powerful cautionary tale, a piece of occupational folklore. It transforms the road from a simple workplace into a place of supernatural significance. By wrapping their very real fears of human violence in a safer, supernatural narrative, the drivers could process and share the anxieties of their nightly work. It's easier to talk about a beautiful ghost than it is to talk about the man with a knife who might be waiting in the shadows. Our third and most compelling suspect is a global psychological phenomenon. The legend is a perfect textbook example of the vanishing hitchhiker archetype, one of the most widespread urban legends in the entire world. From the lonely highways of the American Midwest, where the ghost of Resurrection Mary asks for a ride home from the ballroom where she died, to the country lanes of Europe, the story of a ghostly traveler who is picked up only to disappear is a universal human myth. The Bonfim Blonde is Brazil's most famous and powerful contribution to this global mythos. But her story has a unique, crucial twist that sets her apart. The American hitchhiker is often the victim of a random car crash, a passive soul reenacting her own tragedy. The Bonfim Blonde, however, is the victim of a violent, deliberate crime. Her purpose, as we will see, is not to reenact her death. It is to investigate it. The greatest challenge in this investigation is separating the original core legend from a century of contamination. As the story grew more famous, it was embellished, sensationalized. The quiet, sad ghost of the early accounts was sometimes transformed into a screaming, terrifying ghoul. The story was co-opted into popular culture, its sharp, tragic edges sanded down for mass consumption. To find the truth, we must dig through that mountain of fiction. And when we do, when we focus only on the earliest, most consistent accounts, a new piece of evidence emerges. A pattern hidden in plain sight. The discovery that changes everything is that the story does not always end with the blonde simply disappearing. In a small number of early, obscure accounts, the encounter is a test. After she vanishes, the driver finds something left behind. A single antique gold coin or a pressed dry flower. Or, more chillingly, the next morning he discovers that the fare she would have paid has been mysteriously added to his earnings. But this payment from the grave only occurs if the driver was kind, if he offered her his coat against the cold, if he spoke to her with respect, if he didn't demand payment up front. In the stories where the driver is rude, greedy, or makes unwanted advances, the outcome is different. He is not rewarded. He is punished. These accounts speak of sudden, inexplicable engine failures on the lonely road, of near-fatal crashes, the steering wheel suddenly jerking out of their hands just moments after the encounter, of a creeping, unshakable bad luck that follows the driver for weeks, a string of misfortunes that feels less like coincidence and more like a curse. This is our breakthrough. This is the evidence that shifts the entire investigation. The Bonfim Blonde is not a passive, grieving spirit. She is not a simple echo of a past tragedy. She is an active intelligence, an arbiter, a supernatural judge. Her appearance is not a cry for help. It is a summons. Every man who picks her up is placed on trial, and his simple act of kindness or cruelty determines his verdict. We are not dealing with a victim. We are dealing with a ghost who has taken it upon herself to deliver the justice she was denied in life. The hunt for her story has just become a hunt for the meaning of her judgment. The realization that the haunting is a moral test is the key that unlocks the entire case. It reframes every aspect of the legend, transforming it from a passive ghost story into an active, ongoing investigation conducted by the victim herself. Ana Luisa is not simply reenacting her final moments, she is searching. But what or who is she searching for? Is she testing every man, looking for a flicker of the same darkness that resided in the heart of her killer? Or is her mission broader, a posthumous audit of humanity, a search for the kindness and decency she was denied on her final desperate walk home? To crack this case, we must analyze the test itself. The drivers who are punished are those who exhibit the very traits that likely led to her murder. Think of the context of a woman walking alone at night in the 19th century. Greed, the criminal who sees her fine dress and assumes she has money. Aggression, the man who will not take no for an answer. Predatory behavior, the man who sees her vulnerability not as a reason to protect, but as an opportunity to exploit. The taxi driver who demands an exorbitant fare from the lone rain-soaked woman. The one who makes a lewd comment about her beauty. The one who complains about the short distance. They all fail her test. The accidents that follow, the sudden engine failures, the ghostly whispers in their ear for weeks after. These are not random acts of a vengeful spirit. They are a form of supernatural justice, a karmic echo of the violence she suffered. The ghost of Ana Luisa has turned the lonely roads of Salvador into her courtroom, and every man who stops for her becomes a defendant, unknowingly placed on trial for a crime committed a century ago. Conversely, the drivers who are rewarded are those who show simple human decency. The accounts are specific. The driver who offers her his own coat when he sees her shivering. The one who speaks to her with gentle respect, sensing her profound sadness. The one who, upon hearing her destination is a cemetery, shows not suspicion, but a quiet, compassionate concern. They pass the test. The mysterious payment they receive, the antique gold coin, the inexplicable addition to their earnings is more than just a fare. It is an affirmation. It is a sign that kindness is seen, that it is valued, even by the dead. This breakthrough allows us to understand her true tragic purpose. Her haunting is not about terror. It's about a desperate, unending search for the humanity that was so violently absent on the night of her death. She is not trying to scare the world. She is trying to see if there is any good left in it. So, if Ana Luisa is the judge, who was the original perpetrator? Who was the man whose crime created this phantom arbiter? The official case file is empty. The historical record, sanitized by family influence and the passage of time, is silent. After more than a century, identifying a single individual is an impossibility. But in our investigation, the identity of the killer is not a name. It is a profile. The perpetrator was not a specific person. He was the embodiment of the city's second face, the darkness that lurked just beyond the gas lamps of the elite. He was the man who saw Ana Luisa not as a person, but as an object, an opportunity. A symbol of the wealth and status he could never have, a prize to be taken from the world of the rich. He was the man who saw her vulnerability, her solitary walk, not as a reason to protect her, but as a chance to exert his power. He was the product of a society that, on one hand, placed its wealthy women on pedestals, treating them like porcelain dolls, and on the other, created a world so dangerous that a single misstep, a single moment of unprotected freedom was a death sentence. The man who killed Ana Luisa was not an anomaly. He was a symptom of the brutal hypocrisy of his time. He was a man whose name has been lost to history, but whose actions were so vile, so unjust, they created an echo that has refused to fade. Therefore, the true perpetrator of this crime, the entity that our investigation can finally name, is the silence that followed. The crime was not just the act of a single man. It was the conspiracy of a powerful family to hide a shameful truth, to protect their honor. It was the incompetence, or perhaps the deliberate indifference, of a police force that refused to investigate a crime against a woman who had broken social taboos. And it was the apathy of a society that allowed a young woman's brutal murder to become a forgotten footnote in a dusty archive. Ana Luisa was killed twice, first by the hands of her attacker, and a second time by the shame and silence that buried her story. The ghost of the Bonfim Blonde is not the spirit of a murdered girl. It is the spirit of an unsolved crime, a living, breathing embodiment of a question that was never answered, a justice that was never served. There can be no arrest. The man is long dead, his bones turned to dust, his name likely unrecorded in any history book. But in a strange folkloric sense, the aftermath of the crime is still happening every night on the roads of Salvador. The ghost of Ana Luisa has become her own detective, her own prosecutor. The men she stops are not random. They are a stand-in, an eternal jury of proxies for the man and the system that was never caught. The aftermath for the city was profound. The legend of the Loira de Bonfim became a permanent part of Salvador's identity. She is, in a way, the city's most famous resident. Her story a dark landmark, as real as the churches and the cobblestone streets. It served as a warning, a piece of cultural shorthand that every taxi driver, every late-night traveler understood. The story created a geography of fear, turning a simple road into a place of supernatural significance. The city, which had failed to protect Ana Luisa in life, became the permanent curator of her memory in death. The case we are building is not one that can be presented in a court of law. It is a case presented in the court of public memory. The evidence is the endurance of the story itself. The witnesses are the generations of people who have told the tale, who have felt a chill run down their spine when passing the Bonfim cemetery at night. The argument is simple. A story does not survive for over a century with such specific and consistent details unless it is anchored to a deep and resonant truth. The truth is not that a ghost is literally haunting a road. The truth is that the murder of a woman and the subsequent systemic failure of justice left a wound so deep in the city's psyche that it has been bleeding for over 120 years. The ghost is the scar. Our case is built on the powerful idea that the legend is not a fiction, but a diagnosis. It is a diagnosis of a historical trauma, a story the city created to process a horror that it could not or would not confront directly. We are prosecuting not a man, but the culture of silence that allowed him to get away with murder. The justice system of men failed Ana Luisa. So, the legend created its own. There was no trial for the murder of Ana Luisa de Menezes. Her killer never faced a judge or jury. But in a strange, abstract sense, a trial has been underway for over a century. It is a trial conducted in the public square of Folklore, where the witnesses are taxi drivers and late-night travelers, and the evidence is a collection of inexplicable, chilling encounters. The prosecution's argument, made by the legend itself, is that a great injustice was committed and never rectified. It argues that the failure of human law necessitated the intervention of a supernatural one. The key testimony comes from those who passed her test, the drivers who showed kindness and were rewarded. Their stories are proof that the spirit's intent is not purely malevolent. It is judicial. They are the character witnesses for a ghost, testifying to her search for the good that was absent on the night of her death. The defense's argument is silence. It is the argument of a society that chose to forget, of a history that buried its inconvenient truths. The defense is the rational, modern mind that dismisses these encounters as dreams, as hoaxes, as tricks of the light on a lonely road. It argues that the case is closed because there was never a case to begin with, only a sad death and an overactive imagination. But this defense is weak, for it cannot explain the consistency, the longevity, and the profound psychological power of the story. The verdict in this trial was delivered by the people. By choosing to tell this story, to pass it down from generation to generation, the city of Salvador found the killer guilty in absentia. They ensured that his crime, and more importantly, his victim, would never be truly forgotten. The sentence, however, was not passed upon the killer. He was beyond reach. The sentence was passed upon Ana Luisa herself. She was condemned to become the eternal guardian of her own memory, a ghost bound by the chains of an unsolved crime. Her sentence is to wander, to search, to test, to judge, until the day her story no longer needs to be told. It is a tragic and lonely form of justice, but for a victim whose voice was silenced, it is the only justice she has. The impact of this case is immense, for the victim is not just one woman. Ana Luisa de Menezes became an archetype, a symbol for all the forgotten women, all the victims of violence whose stories were buried by shame, power, and indifference. She is the patron saint of the unresolved. Her legend gave a voice to the voiceless, a terrifying spectral form to the silent epidemic of violence against women that has plagued societies for centuries. The community's response was to transform her from a victim into a force of nature. By telling her story, they took a symbol of tragic vulnerability and imbued her with a posthumous power. She is no longer just the girl who was murdered. She is the ghost who judges men. This transformation is a profound act of cultural alchemy. It is a community's attempt to retroactively give power to a woman who had none. Her legacy is not one of sadness, but of a chilling, cautionary power. She is a reminder that a story, a memory, can be a far more enduring form of justice than any court of law. The case of the Bonfim Blonde is a perfect illustration of why we create monsters. We do not create them out of pure fantasy. We forge them from the raw, painful material of our own reality. The ghost of Ana Luisa is a beautiful, tragic, and terrifying construct. She is the answer to an unanswerable question. She is the justice for an unforgivable crime. And she is a mirror reflecting our own capacity for both cruelty and kindness. Her story is a testament to the enduring power of a narrative. A family's influence can bury a police report. Time can erase a killer's name. But a good story, a story anchored in a real human tragedy and a profound moral question, is almost impossible to kill. It becomes a ghost in its own right, haunting our collective memory, demanding to be heard, demanding that we look into the darkness and ask, who did this and why? The next time you see a lone figure on a dark road at night, what will you do? Will you lock your doors and speed past, driven by a modern fear of the unknown? Or will you stop, driven by an older, more human impulse of compassion? The legend of the Bonfim Blonde warns us that the choice matters. For on some nights, on some lonely roads, you are not just a driver. You are a juror, and your kindness is being tested.